It's Wombat Jones for Ramen Chokehold. I'm coming to you live from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and we're doing the ramen wrap-up, and I've got my old mate Jeff with me. G'day, Jeff.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
I'm okay, mate, and yourself?
Yeah, doing all right. Not in a great place like Kuala Lumpur. I'm just in shitty old Pittsburgh, but, you know, it's all the
Them's the
same.
breaks, my man. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you the pleasure of introducing our very special guest.
Yeah, we got Pittsburgh's own, the pride of Pennsylvania, FloCombat's Hunter Alek Homistek. What's going on?
Nice. I love it, man. I love it. The middle name is Alek with a K, not an X. So, like, I feel like I should just close this hangout already. You done fucked up,
bro.
So I'm out. Plus,
That's why I run the ship, bro. The ship.
Plus, he's talking shit on Pittsburgh already. Shitty old Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's amazing, man. If you don't like it, you can just get out then.
This is what I'm going to put up with all the time. So, you know, but hey, we're here because we're going to wrap up last week and maybe talk a little about what's coming up for this week. And we're going to try and do this every week, aren't we, boys?
Yes, sir.
That's the plan.
All right, well, let's get straight into it. The weekend, we've seen a big, massive card, a pay-per-view event, UFC 222. And basically, let's just get straight into it and talk about Cyborg. I mean, it was pretty much a layup for her, if you ask me. I didn't consider this fight to be that attractive. Pardon the pun. What did you guys think of the card? Because I was actually driving down from Queensland, so I didn't get to see most of it.
Yeah, I think if you exclude the main event, actually a really solid card, intriguing on paper too. Because UFC takes so much shit. So when they do something like this, I want to give them, a hand. I want to take my hat off to them. The way they reassembled this card when everything started falling apart, it was looking like they were going to cancel this pay-per-view altogether. And they turned it into a card that I was actually pretty interested in watching. Like I had to make time. Like, oh, well, I can't miss that now. It's actually really fun. A lot of prospects. Putting Cyborg in the main event, I think Cyborg deserves her due. I've from day one been a big supporter of Cyborg and wish they would push her a little more. But if she keeps fighting people like this, I mean, we saw it with Ben Askren, right? It doesn't matter. If you keep smashing them, you're never going to get the respect until you fight people that the audience perceives as worthy of competing against you. So beating Kunitskaya, it looked good. It was another dominant performance, put her out in the first round, but that's what everybody expected. But I will say, man, the only thing that kept me like on edge about this fight, the last time I felt that way about a female fight was Joanna versus Rose. I'm like, oh, Joanna's going to smash Rose. It's not going to be close. And then look what happened. And the time before that, Rousey versus Holm. Oh, Holm's not going to be close. It's not going to be competitive. So, like, every time I felt like a girl didn't have a chance, the huge upset happened. So I was like, shit, maybe. Like, I think I put on Twitter, scissor flying heel hooks coming. So, but there was no flying heel hook this time.
Yeah, no flying heel hook, just domination pretty much. There was little intrigue. I think Yana physically was the first person that was able to match up with Cyborg, but other than that, skill-wise, it just wasn't even worth it. And as much as I respect what Cyborg's done in the sport, it's difficult for me to get up for her at this point because unless it's someone like Amanda Nunes who was proven in this sport and is someone who we know can match her skill for skill and maybe even size for size, it's just not interesting to me anymore.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there because I do have another person in mind for Cyborg. And you mightn't agree with that, but being the Aussie that I am, I'm telling you, and obviously the skill set, when we last saw Megan Anderson fight, the skill set, if we were to balance them up against Cyborg, okay, maybe they don't stack up, right? However, there's one thing that Megan always says, and I totally agree with it, is that she's a true featherweight. She's actually going to have the size advantage on Cyborg. She's going to have the reach advantage on Cyborg, and she hits fucking hard. So, I'm just going to pull you up a little bit there. There is another option there.
But I think the problem is everybody looks at Cyborg and it's starting to turn into maybe not that way, but I think a lot of people see her as just a big chick who hits hard. But there's some legitimate skill there. I mean, I believe she's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She's a legitimate striker. And so, when you look at Megan Anderson, it's great that she matches her size. and that she's even going to have some advantages in that respect. But as far as the actual fight goes, I just don't see a single area where she could match her or even best her, especially now that she hasn't fought in, what, 2-3 years? I mean, now we're talking about ring rust, and maybe that doesn't affect Dominic Cruz, but I can pretty sure well tell you that it'll affect Megan Anderson.
What do you think, Hunter? Do you think Anderson's got a chance, mate?
I personally think that her time off is a huge benefit to her because she needed time to really develop her skills and not get thrown to the wolves yet. So if she's been training her lady balls off like she should have been in preparation for Cyborg for the past year, that's going to be a huge advantage, I think, if that fight gets put together. I think her last fight was actually like January 2017, I want to say. So not as long ago as maybe it feels like. It does feel like a while because some stuff's been kind of set up and then put on the shelf, and it feels like she's just been out of the spotlight for a while. But I mean, I think her not fighting Cyborg right away was really smart on her part. And I don't know if there were reasons behind that. You know, there's rumors about anything. You know, I've heard people say, oh, it's a USADA thing. She doesn't want to deal with USADA, so she's not taking the fight. Like, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know why she didn't take the fight. But ultimately, I think it's to her benefit. As long as she's been taking it seriously, training hard. I mean, you see what happens when somebody has time to prepare for one specific opponent. Megan Anderson knows she's not coming into the UFC to fight Holly Holm, right? She's coming in for Cyborg. Like, that is Cyborg's opponent. And the instance that comes to mind is like Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz, because Cody's whole life, man, this is somebody that I tracked regionally strong. You know, he's lived close to me and everything, fought regionally. So I kind of watched his whole career, and he was always talking about Dominic Cruz because Dominic Cruz was the man, you know, for the longest time. Still is the man. But Cody studied him, knew him in and out, and when that fight came, you could tell Cody was ready for that. And a lot of people felt that Cody wasn't ready, but that's what, you know, years and years of studying somebody and focusing on them, analyzing how do I match up with them. If Megan Anderson's been doing that with Cyborg, that could be huge because I guarantee you Cyborg's not at home like studying Megan Anderson film like, oh, how can I get ready for this girl? I'm so terrified, you know. Megan could definitely surprise her, and that's interesting to me. And physically, of course, man, Megan Anderson is huge. I do think she will be physically bigger than Cyborg, and who knows how Cyborg will respond to that, but she's seen everything. You know, I was really surprised the way she handled Holly Holm surprised the hell out of me. I definitely didn't see that fight going that way to where Cyborg would be the more technical and precise striker over 5 rounds. So seeing that Cyborg had that, just, you know, I don't know how you beat her at this point.
So, I mean, that was it's going to be interesting to see what Dana does with that and who he matches her up with. But it's either going to be Nunes or Anderson, I think. I don't think there's any other option for him. But let's move on from that. And obviously there was another massive debut, and that was for Mackenzie Dern, which, I mean, there's a lot of hype going around about Mackenzie Dern. And I think we got to see why, but only for about the last minute. So tell me about the fight, boys.
Yeah, I don't know really what everyone was expecting out of her debut. I saw a lot of shit talking on Twitter about her striking. That's what's to expect. She's probably not been striking that long beyond her debut, so we're talking, you know, she made her debut in 2016. She hasn't been striking that much longer. These are things that she's going to have to overcome her entire career. So what concerned me more than the striking was actually the wrestling. And I even put out a poll on Ramen Chokehold to see if anyone agreed with me, because in my eyes, she had her up against the cage 4 or 5 times, had a chance to get her down. Yoder, credit to her, she showed good takedown defense, but still, you know, when you're at the level of Mackenzie Dern, you should be able to take somebody down like that. She also shot a double leg under the jab a couple times, got deep, but she was just never able to drive off her legs or find a corner to turn in order to actually take it to the mat. That's the problem that I see more than anything else, because you saw once she got it on the floor, it was bad news for Ashley Yoder. I mean, she found her back within 5 seconds and was threatening a choke. The problem is 14 of the 15 minutes that they went were on the feet. So, you know, yeah, she has bad striking, but there are ways to overcome that beyond abandoning your grappling and trying to become some great striker, which she's never going to be. It's just not going to happen. And we saw it the most notable one that I can think of right now is Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis went from a world-class striker, got grapple fucked by RDA, and all of a sudden he went to Izzy Martinez and was trying to become, you know, Eddie Alvarez or some kind of grinder and trying to make sure that he can defend the takedowns to the best of his ability. It caught up with him because all of a sudden guys are getting better striking-wise. He no longer had that advantage. I don't want to see that with Mackenzie Dern. Granted, they're never going to have her on the floor. They're never really going to be able to contest her with that. She's one of the greatest female BJJ practitioners of all time. But if she's not training her wrestling the way it needs to be, people are going to be able to keep that fight standing where her chin is over her toes and she's begging to be KO'd.
And here's my positive spin. I'm going to be Mr. Positive on this one. So you look at the fight. Sure, her striking wasn't good. Yeah, she couldn't get takedowns. Yeah, she went 15 minutes. Yeah, couldn't get the submission. Yeah, she still won. Like that to me is the biggest point of it all. She's crafty. She has good instincts when it comes to fighting. She knows how to win fights, and that's all she's ever done is win. And furthermore, she's like you said, she's just going to keep getting better at a rapid rate. You know, when somebody is just fresh at something, it's like a kid learning something, you know, at this point. You take a 7-year-old kid and try to teach him something, he'll pick up on it way faster than if you or I tried to do it at this point. She just has that kind of spongy brain for MMA. And I still think you see improvements in her UFC debut. And not to mention, I mean, you talk about ring rust earlier with Megan Anderson, but UFC jitters are a real thing too. We've seen people flop in their debuts all the time. And how hyped of a debut that was for Dern. A lot of people don't get that kind of shine coming into their debut. So despite all the pressure, the adversity, the things she couldn't do in the fight, she still won and got 15 minutes of experience at the highest level. And I truly only expect her to get better and better and better from here. So did she pull off a Goga Plata in the first round? No. No, she didn't get that kind of submission, that crazy performance that you want to say, wow, like she's next level world class. But she looked good enough to me, and I'm definitely interested to see where she goes. And she's training at the MMA lab. You know that crew there is going to keep polishing her, keep tuning her up. So she's doing all the right things, and it can only be up from here.
So here's my question to you two guys then, and it's like what you said. It's her debut. Now, if we think, let's say, 5 years ago even, if someone's making a debut in the UFC and their skill set's not up to par, you get murdered. So what's going on lately where we see, the likes of the Mackenzie Derns of the Sugar Sean O'Malley's and all that sort of thing? Well, probably not Sugar Sean O'Malley. He's legit. But, those fighters that they're starting to bring in that don't have that skill set there.
Well, I think it's a combination of the people they're bringing in. You've got not just a normal somebody, an amateur debut, somebody who was on the regional scene for a while, had a couple amateur fights, had 3 good pro fights, and jumped into the UFC. Mackenzie Dern's a totally different animal, been training martial arts her entire life. So she was prepared for that moment. And they built her up the right way through LFA and Invicta. She came up slow. She came up quickly, but the right way quickly, I feel like. Got the right steps in between. So there's that. And also, they matched her up against Ashley Yoder. And no disrespect to Ashley Yoder, but she's a borderline UFC talent herself. So they gave her a good matchup in Yoder to look good and to handle adversity. So I just feel like that was smart matchmaking on their part in this instance.
And do you think it sort of tarnishes the UFC in, what they used to be to what they are now?
It's just different because MMA has grown so much. There's so many more guys competing. And even just in martial arts, like we're talking about Mackenzie Dern, you can earn your stripes in other combat sports. Boxing, we obviously saw Israel Adesanya make his UFC debut. He's got 11 MMA fights, but, he made his bones in the kickboxing circuit. So there's just a lot more out there for guys and ladies. So, the reason you're able to see these kind of almost a bit undeveloped talents succeed to a certain extent in the UFC so early on is because there are people out there that the UFC can sign and that they even have on their roster that are kind of at that level. The UFC is no longer just for the best. They're trying to farm their own talent. Even in Invicta, like they're paying people in other organizations so that they can wait in line and compete for them when the time's ready. So I think they're just developing fighters more than they ever have. So I have no problem with it. It definitely doesn't hurt them in any case. I mean, obviously Mackenzie Dern draws eyes. So if they can find people who they're going to be able to match her up with and feature her the way they did at UFC 222, that's not a problem.
So I dropped his name a little bit earlier. It was a little bit of a slip up, but let's move on to Sugar Sean O'Malley. And I'm driving home from Queensland. I was covering Eternal 30 up there, and I'm checking my timeline, and while I was pulling the car over to check it, of course, and all I could see was how amazing this kid was in the first 2 rounds, and then all of a sudden, next minute, we have a broken foot or something of the like, and you guys take it from there.
Very questionable fight IQ from Mr. Sukum Ta there. I don't know, man. Like, I haven't heard anybody really ask him about it either, which is as much my fault for not trying to reach out. But I would love to know what he was thinking, why he didn't just stand that back up and put him out. He may have not even needed to put Sugar Sean out because Sugar Sean literally basically couldn't stand up. So the ref very well could have just called the fight. Like, Andre may not have needed to do anything besides stand up. So that was crazy, man. But like you said, the first 2 rounds are really my takeaways in this fight, man. What an exciting prospect inside and outside the cage. He's made his buzz the right way through highlight reel knockouts, through the things he says, through his actions. He's the stoner. He's got that whole persona nailed down. He seems like a guy you would just play Call of Duty with and smoke some weed with him. So how many MMA fans fit that demographic, man? That's our guy. Like, so Sugar Sean's exciting as hell. And I mean, his style is insane. That first round, especially, when you get a chance, man, go fire up. Just watch that first round if you didn't get to see the thing in full, because he's creative as hell. He's slick. He's got the look. He's got the moves. Everything about him screams superstar potential. So we'll see how he heals up from this fractured leg or foot, whatever it ended up being, and take it from there.
And he's a big dude, and he's long, and the way he walks guys down, it immediately puts their guard up and puts them in a box. I mean, you saw in that first round, Sukum thought was a few seconds away from being finished because he just had no answer. I mean, I wish he would use his jab a little bit more and paw to keep him on the outside, but the kick combinations that he had and the creativity that he was showing was keeping him at bay in his own way. In the second round, we saw his guard. He was throwing up some submissions. So, he's well-rounded. He's composed, that we saw in the first fight and even in the second fight. Obviously, he stood up at one point, like Hunter was saying, and he had a broken foot. He was fighting on one foot, and what I think a lot of people miss is the fact that he almost knocked Andre out with the spinning back fist up against the cage. The guy, I am all on board with Sean O'Malley. Obviously you have to develop him a little bit more. There are certain things that he has to work on, but honestly, like, this guy in a couple years could be contending. He's not on that Sage Northcutt path, in my eyes, where it takes him a while, 7, 8, 9 fights before he really starts getting in the groove. He's in the groove now, and it speaks to his confidence. He's got, composure beyond his years. It's as if he's been, in the game for years and years beyond what he actually has experienced. I'm all in on Sean O'Malley.
Well, I'm going to be the positive guy in this one, and for Sukumtov, because I've been to a lot of fights, and unless you've been to a lot of fights and seen them up close, you get a different perspective when you're actually there live. Now, obviously, I didn't see the fight, and I wasn't there live, but the one thing that I will say is when I see guys take people down like that for absolutely no reason with dumb fight IQ, for argument's sake, and you guys telling me that he got absolutely lit up for the first 2 rounds, I could say that he might have been just working on autopilot. You know what I mean? Like, he could have got cracked and his head might have been fuzzy as all hell, and he might have seen that he kind of had him, a little bit hurt, and just the programming kicked in. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what he says when someone does get him to interview him about it. But I would suggest that's more than likely the case.
Yeah, and I will say he seemed to be kind of upset with the decision, or like he thought he won before the cards were read. So like you said, man, he may have thought he won that second round. He obviously won the third round. But in his head, maybe he did think he won the second round. But it seemed very clear watching from home. But like you said, man, it's way, way different when you're in there. How many times do we see fighters say they don't even know what round it is? You know, it's not, and not even because they got rocked or concussed, but just because when you're in that moment, you're so focused that you're not really keeping track of that. So who knows?
Yeah, my thought is that he actually.
You go, mate.
My thought is that he actually thought he won the second round. Exactly what Hunter was saying, because, you know, the second round was a little weird because I think sometimes, especially when you're inside the fight, like you were saying, you get a different perspective on things. And I think because he was on top and he was in control, in the past that would work to win you a round or even steal you the round. So I think in his eyes, he might have won the second. And in the third, he didn't feel he could knock him out because Sean has proven he's got a chin. So even though he was damaged, he saw that more as an opportunity to take him down and seal the decision more than just, you know, leaving himself vulnerable.
Well, I'll tell you one person who did believe he won the fight, and I'm actually of the same vein. And I've even got into a discussion with Damian Brown about it, especially about his fight at Perth at UFC 221, is where, you know, Nate Diaz come out and said, if you can't walk out of the cage, how the fuck did you win the fight? And I'm actually down that same road because with Damian Brown, obviously, Dong Young Kim had a broken leg, you know. So that night I was there at the after party watching Damian Brown sipping on a whiskey, whilst Dong Young Kim's in the hospital getting his broken leg attended to. And very similar again in this fight. So what do you guys think about that? I know round-by-round scoring and pride rules and all that sort of shit. But when it comes down to it, I mean, yes, it's a sport, but it's a fight. And if you have something broken and the other guy doesn't, you know, I don't see how you won the fight.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and I can definitely see it both ways. And the fight, I think it comes down to what do you consider the fight versus the scored fight, you know? So if the other guy's a broken foot and you don't, then yeah, you probably won the fight. However, there were 2 rounds that are scored, and the way the scoring system is set up, that doesn't really matter. You don't just automatically win 3 rounds because you broke his foot in 1 round, you know? So it ultimately doesn't matter. And that, the fact that Nate Diaz said that's the most perfect thing ever, because is there a more perfect example of that mentality than the Diaz brothers? You know, Diaz 1, 2, 5, what? So, I mean, what are you going to do, dude? I mean, yeah, he broke his foot, but you still lost 2 rounds out of 3, so you lost the fight that was scored. I mean, you know that's how it is. You know, it'd be one thing if the fighters didn't know the scoring criteria or weren't sure how it was going to go, but they know damn well you lose 2 out of 3 rounds and you lost the fight.
Well, I don't even think this isn't even the same thing. Damian Brown broke Dong Hyun Kim's leg because he leg kicked him to death. Sean O'Malley broke his foot because Andre put up his elbow and blocked the kick. It's not the same thing. Sean broke his own foot. Andre had nothing to do with that. So, I mean, I guess in a sense you could say he won the fight because if it was a never-ending contest, eventually Sean would have gotten, taken out. But, there's a difference between breaking your foot when your opponent inflicts damage on you, and there's a difference between breaking your foot because you're beating the shit out of the guy that you're fighting. So even in that context, Nate Diaz is he came from the clouds with this one. I'm not entirely sure what he meant by it. I don't know if there was shade being thrown, but
does he ever not come from the clouds, though, to be fair?
Yeah, but that's his guy. Sean just came out with a weed strain. They should be getting together. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, trying to take a win away from him.
Dude, maybe he's jealous. Maybe he sees Sugar Sean intruding on his turf as the weed guy.
So moving on, and we're going to talk about this last, about UFC 22, because I believe it was, the coming of the next era. It really was ushering in the next era when we're talking about, Frankie Edgar and Brian Ortega. So, boys, run me through the fight. Tell me what you thought about the performance. I've seen the finish. it was scary, man. I mean, to do that to Frankie Edgar, that's next level. So, Jeff, tell me what you thought, man.
Yeah, it's tough for me because I think, as many people would agree, Frankie Edgar is a legend of the sport and one of the reasons why I got into the sport. So it was tough to watch, but Brian Ortega is the real deal. I mean, if you didn't already know that after he submitted Cub Swanson, you know it now because, you know, he doesn't – obviously he's got the grappling and he's got that front headlock series and he's got the triangle, T-City, all that good stuff. But he's developing his striking. And every single time out we see that the guy's adding more and more to his resume, and he's getting better on the feet. That intercepting elbow was not something that I've seen a whole lot from him. And even when he does throw it, that's the first time that I've ever seen him land it clean. I mean, straight on the nose. Frankie was essentially done after that. I understand the uppercut finished him off, but Frankie was in bad trouble in a way that we have not seen since the Gray Maynard fight. So, you know, Brian Ortega is really becoming the real deal. And when you look forward towards that Max Holloway fight, it gets really interesting because Max is another one of those guys. I don't want to say slow starter, but it takes him a round or two to get into it. You saw it with the Jose Aldo fights. Once he gets into it, he's hard to beat. But then you look at Brian Ortega. He's got, 4 or 5 final round finishes. As the fight goes on, he gets very dangerous. So that fight is going to be very interesting when it comes up on us.
Oh, yeah. Brian Ortega terrifies me, man. And if I was a featherweight, I'd be terrified of Brian Ortega too, for sure. It's crazy because 2 years ago, man, if you would have said Brian Ortega versus Frankie or Brian Ortega versus Max, I'd be like, why would you ever put that fight together? Like, Ortega's not on their level. Like, even after he beat Clay Guida, it was one of those wins where I was like, yeah, he knocked him out late, but, dude, he was clearly losing that fight. Like, I didn't go away from that necessarily feeling, oh, Brian Ortega's way better than Clay Guida, you know. It was like, he did awesome, rallied for the finish, but was getting beat to that point. And now you're wiping out Frankie Edgar in the first round. He beat Cub Swanson twice, in my mind, effectively. I mean, he had the submission at the end of the first round, got saved by the bell, submitted him again in the second round. That's insane. Like, what is this guy doing? And now he's knocking Frankie Edgar out. Like, that just doesn't happen, man. Nobody finishes Frankie like that. And now you've got Max, who, if you're probably talking about the 2 best chins at featherweight, I'm going Frankie and Max. Like, you just can't finish those guys with strikes. But now I'm wondering, and we're talking about Brian Ortega striking, which is the craziest development of all of this fight. Who cares about his striking? Like, his submissions are the X factor, but now he's got two X factors. He's built like a welterweight. I don't know what the hell you do with this guy. Like, Max Holloway's got his hands full, and I can't believe that he has his hands full with Brian Ortega, but there's no doubt about it. But Max, man, yeah, I'm taking nothing away from Max and not underestimating Max at all, because if he just goes out and tunes Ortega up, I'm not going to be surprised. Max is that good, man, and I truly believe, you know, Max talking about this McGregor fight, tweeting about McGregor, him and McGregor acknowledging each other on Twitter. You know, to get McGregor to acknowledge you on Twitter is a win. You know, McGregor knows how valuable his time is. He's not going to tweet somebody that he ultimately doesn't care about or doesn't see some kind of long-term play with them. So it's on McGregor's mind too. And if Holloway gets past Ortega, he could take the mic, and who knows, man? Who knows? Maybe he could set up that rematch too. So I'm pumped about it. Featherweight division was looking pretty shitty not too long ago, and now suddenly we've got an awesome crop up at the top. So I'm loving it.
And it did come out today that Dana White actually did offer him the championship fight. So it is happening. We're not sure where. We're not sure why. We're not sure, you know, how. But he did put out a little clip where Dana was on the phone to him saying, you got the champion shot, kid. So it's happening, and I'm fired up as fuck for that fight. I'll give you the tip. So and that basically wraps up last week, the first week of March, and let's look ahead a little bit. You know, before we finish up here, let's look ahead to this week coming up. And Hunter, mate, we've got a nice card on FloCombat over there, and it's your namesake card.
Oh man, I'm pumped about this one, the Warfare MMA 18 card. down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So if you guys have been following FloCombat kind of since we started, Warfare has been a promotion that just routinely brings really, really high-level production, really high-level athletes as well. You know, some of the better cards that we get on FloCombat definitely are the Warfare cards. So I'm pumped about it, man. The main event is what you absolutely can't miss. We've got 2 heavyweights, Ben Rowland. Ben Rowland has like three belts, man. He's like a 3-promotion heavyweight champion right now. Like, this dude just goes everywhere, knocks out their champion, and takes their belt. So it's awesome. And then across the cage from him, you're going to have Austin Lane, who used to be a defensive end for the Jaguars and also the Bears. So he's got the NFL pedigree, which, you know, equals super athlete, and which you also know in the heavyweight division, sometimes being a super athlete is all you need. You know, you don't even necessarily need to be the most skilled when you're just bigger, faster, and hit harder than everybody else. So I'm pumped about that matchup, man. Both guys are undefeated. Both guys all wins via knockout. And even in his amateur career, Austin Lane knocked everybody out first round. So this dude is just an animal. Like, I cannot wait for this fight. And Ben Rowland is exactly the kind of guy that can derail a hype train in an instant. So that's the main event at Warfare 18. And that's the one, you know, if you got time on Saturday and you're just itching for some MMA, you best be going over to FloCombat, firing up that card.
So that's how we see it, mate. We go to FloCombat and sign up there, is it?
Yes, sir. That's simple. You'll see articles and videos and banners everywhere to sign up. You definitely can't miss it.
Alrighty, so that's what's happening over there in the US. Now, Jeff, I know because you work at Ramen Chokehold and you cover the Australian scene, we've also got a card down in Australia, which is Diamond Fighting Championship 5. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that card, mate? You did a nice article.
Yeah, we got some heavyweights of our own. A title on the line, Mike Turner coming back. He had a run at light heavyweight, didn't end great, but as I featured in the article, you got Duke Didier, Nathan Reddy, and Jim Crute. So that's a tough 3. Moves up to heavyweight, gets a nice submission in his heavyweight debut. Took the title. Now he's going up against Benzo Soli. So Soli's a legit heavyweight and a KO artist. So these two, you kind of get a bit of the grappler versus striker thing going on, but both these dudes are coming to finish. So it's going to be a great main event. And then in the co-main event, Joel the Mantis Kendrick coming back, fighting Jared Bark. Should be an interesting one. I think Joel's got something for him. But, you know, a great feature in that card, and all throughout the card, there's some really interesting matchups coming through.
And shout out to Joel the Mantis Kendrick. He was my debut commentary partner. So there's a little fun fact for you. And obviously, I am here in the beautiful Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I'm here for One Championship, which goes down on Friday. And you can obviously get the live stream on their website. But we've basically got Gianni Suba taking on Reese Lightning McLaren. I've been spending quite a lot of time with Reese this week. And let me tell you, I am oh my God, I'm fired up for this. But now, it was originally supposed to be for the title. And unfortunately, Marias had to pull out with a knee injury, I believe. And it sounds like he could actually be out for a little while. So whoever wins this fight, you know, is next in line for the title shot. I know we've got an interim champion, but it does sound like he could be out for a while. So, you know, that interim belt still might be up for grabs. So that's going to be interesting to see. It's an absolute great fight between two guys that really do finish quite a lot of fights by submission. They both do have TKOs on their record as well. Suba's 9-2 with just about every one of his fights in One Championship. Reese is 10-5, but he fights nothing but the best of the best. Took Bibiano to a split decision in his World Championship fight. So I'm super looking forward to this card. Special mention on the card as well, we've got Christian Lee. He fights one of the OGs in Yokota. And if he gets past him, he's got a pretty good shout for a title shot of his own, actually, against our own Martin Nguyen. They've fought once before. And so it's going to be interesting to see if Lee can get past the experience of Yokota. And if he can, he really needs to grab that microphone and shout out to Martin because, you know, the featherweight division for One Championship is starting to really heat up, and you got to sort of separate yourself to get those title shots, especially when in 2 weeks' time Marty's going for his 3rd belt. And if he wins that, I mean, we're talking global MMA superstar, and it's never been done in any other worldwide MMA organization. And Hunter, I want your opinion on this, mate, because, you know, one championship's not so big over there in the US, basically because of time difference. But, you know, if Martin Nguyen gets something like that done, where would you put him in world MMA?
It is big, man. Like, definitely don't undersell how big one championship is here. You know, you say UFC, Bellator, Professional Fighters League, LFA, and then one championship. You know, if you were naming the five, those are the five that would come to mind of most fans, I would say. But if he wins 3 belts, if he becomes a 3-division champion, that means something no matter where you're at. You know, I don't care if you're fighting in my backyard. If you beat up 3 neighbors that call themselves champions, I'm still going to be pumped about your prospects. So the last guy, you know, Juan Archuleta actually just made his Bellator debut and wrecked a guy. He actually got like a 30-23 scorecard, by the way, which you never, ever see. So that was incredible.
Only second time ever, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. Archuleta was, I want to say, a 3 or 4 division champion
4.
in King of the Cage. Yeah, 4. So he's the closest equivalent, I would say, to what Martin Nguyen's about to do. So, and obviously Bellator scooped up Archuleta right away after he got that 4th belt. They've had their eyes on him. You know, he also trains with Cub Swanson, TJ Dillashaw, and those guys, so he gets some push from them and some shine from them. If he wins this 3rd belt, I mean, yeah, absolutely, man. Worldwide star, you have to at least consider him for the top 10 in whatever division he wants to call home. You know, I don't know what division you would technically classify him as at that point. Where does he want to like make his belt? Like, hypothetically, if he came to the UFC, which division would he settle into, do you think?
I believe he'd be 66 kilos, so 135. So he'd be a bantamweight.
Okay, so a super stacked and deep division right now, but still 3 belts, man, and 1 is legit. I mean, nobody's underselling how legit 1 is. It's not like I said, it's not like you're fighting in my backyard. So if he does that, man, absolutely, you got to at least consider him for the top 10. I'll understand if people don't want to put him in the top 10. You know, I get it. It's the same as Ben Askren, people not wanting to say he's top 5 or championship level. I get it. I think you're wrong, but I get it. So you got to at least consider it.
And not only that, but on that card, and you know, we're jumping a little bit ahead, but I mean, I'm pretty excited about it because I will be there in Bangkok. And also on that card is 1x Gary Tonin. Now, Jeff, mate, you've been following this guy. I want you to tell me about how excited are you for this guy's debut?
Words do not describe it, man. Honestly, like, Gary Tonin competing in MMA is something I've wanted to see for a long time. That we've seen great grapplers go into the UFC and have success, go into one and have success, you know, these other promotions. Gary Tonin is probably my favorite grappler. He's obviously dominant on the no-gi scene. He trains with the Danaher Death Squad. And I don't even care about his striking. Put him on the ground with anyone. He will get anyone to the ground. He's a decent wrestler. I mean, he's mostly known for his leg locks, so I would imagine he's got some entries to that. He's not just going to take him down and you know, try and hold him there. He's going to legitimately rip some people's knees apart, and I'm excited to see it. I mean, he's fighting a guy who, all respect to him, he's got balls getting into the cage with him, but, you know, he's what Conor McGregor would call a jobber. And this is not going to end pretty for him, but it's going to end pretty for me because Gary Tonin is gonna take over the world.
Well, let me tell you, he might have balls, but he's probably not going to have an ACL after the fight.
Dude, it's so true. Like, the closest equivalent I could think of is Husamar Palhares. You know, that super aggressive leg lock style. I mean, that's what Tonin has. And Tonin, you go look up his grappling match with Palhares. You know, it's one of the best matches I've ever seen, I think, in pure grappling. Tonin is super aggressive, and that's what really excites me about him transitioning to MMA. You know, he's not a positional grappler. He's not going to Jake Shields you. And even though he trains with Jake Shields, like, he gets that experience and can do that and knows those tricks, but he is just constantly searching for a finish. And I don't know if that's going to be for better or for worse. You know, in MMA, we've seen guys get overzealous going for submissions, and that's when they get caught or when they get swept and then pounded out. So we'll see if it works out for him. But like you, Jeff, man, I got super high hopes for Gary Tonin. And let's not even – his skills speak for themselves. You know, his accolades speak for themselves. Outside the cage, this dude's fucking hilarious. Like, this guy has an amazing personality. And especially fighting in Asia, like, that's exactly where you want a personality like that with an Asian organization. he is one of those guys that I could very well see going viral, so to speak, you know, inside and outside the cage. Big time superstar potential if he can string it together. So definitely one of my most hotly anticipated MMA debuts of this year for sure.
So that's all going down on the 24th of March. We'll have some massive coverage going on there at Ramen Chokehold and FloCombat. So, boys, last little wrap up. Where can we find you guys on social media? And do you have any other hot takes or anything else that you want to share? Jeff, you go first.
Well, one other thing I want to throw out there, Darian Caldwell submitting Leandro Higo in the first round with that guillotine was not something that I expected to happen. I expected it to be a decision. Maybe he rides him out on top and finds a submission in the later goings, but Leandro Higo is a legit fighter. I've got him in my top 15 in the bantamweight division. So that was a big win for Darian Caldwell, so I just want to give him some love.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, man. Caldwell's an animal, obviously a guy, you know, over at Flo. We got Flo Wrestling as well, and Flo Wrestling's huge on Darian Caldwell, so they're always talking him up and loving all of his stuff. So, I mean, you got to keep your eyes on that guy too. And again, you got to consider him as a top 10 bantamweight in the world. I don't see how you don't do that after this. So he's right there, man. It's an interesting time we live in where the Bellator stars, the One Championship stars, other promotions can crack that top 10 with ease. I mean, 5 years ago, it would be crazy to think that, you know, the best fighters were only in the UFC, and that's just simply not the case now. So that's fun. But as far as finding me on social media, just follow FloCombat instead. You don't care about my personal shit. We all know that. Just at FloCombat everywhere. As far as a hot take, I'll give you this, dude. Led Zeppelin kind of sucks. So everybody thinks they're awesome. Led Zeppelin fucking sucks. So put that one down.
Here's the thing. I agree.
Oh, shit.
Dude, have you heard Greta Van Fleet?
I have. They sound damn near exactly like Zeppelin. And I'm not.
You don't like them? You're not into them? Greta Van. Oh, Jesus Christ, man. Oh, my God.
Not into it. Not into it. Get them out of here. I respect what they're doing. You know, young kids doing their thing, making it, cracking in with a – you can't say it's a unique sound because it sounds exactly like Zeppelin, so there's that. But I'm not into it. I know people are. A lot of my friends are. My friends give me shit for this take. But I know I'm right, so I don't mind.
Damn straight you're right, brother. You make sure you hold that opinion up because that is right opinion. All right. If you want to catch me and Jeff, just follow us at Ramen Chokehold. We're coming in hot this year. FloCombat, Ramen Chokehold. We're taking over, baby. So we'll be here same time next week, and we're going to try and do this every single week. So, boys, thank you so much for joining me, and then we'll catch you next week sometime.
Yes, sir. Later on, man.
Thanks.
All right, we're off.